We're here in the Teachers Club in Dublin to interview John McAnulty of Socialist Democracy and a former member of Belfast City Council. So John, how and when did you first get involved in politics?
Right, okay, the first political incident I was involved in was the Divis Street riots of 1964, and at the time I had no political ideas whatsoever, and I was to some extent radicalised by the extreme violence of the RUC. What had happened is that Sinn Féin had decided to stand an election. They'd hoisted a tricolour inside their election office, and Ian Paisley said he was coming to get it. The RUC said, no, we'll go instead. So they smashed up the office and took the tricolour, and there followed quite a lot of intense rioting over at least 3 days, which ended with the occupation area by bands of B specials. So that was quite an awakening for me. The next thing I remember, I think, is 1966, when, again, it had to do with the Republicans. They started to form open political clubs, the Republican clubs, and Bill Craig banned it, and there was a student mobilisation, a very, very large student mobilisation against the ban, which involved the students leaving the university and going into the city centre, and that was a demonstration of, mass power of the, mass, incipient mass movement. And then finally, in 1968, I joined People's Democracy, and that was immediately after I was in the Young Socialist Alliance, which then became People's Democracy, fused into it. And basically by the time I joined People's Democracy, I was already Marxist, and had basically there was a new left led by people who'd been trained in London and moved back to Ireland. The remnants of the old Irish Workers Group were involved.
And could you tell me about the People's Democracy's long march from Belfast to Derry?
Well, not an awful lot, because I wasn't on it, which is quite strange. Nearly everybody else in the world seems to have been. I was at the start, and it was at the end, and was sort of involved in between, but I just started a new job that day and couldn't get away. So the context of the Long March was that Terence O'Neill had made a speech. Ulster is at the crossroads, and in that Ulster at the crossroads, actually I reread it fairly recently, he makes an appeal for a truce. He says, this trouble's terrible, I want you civil rights people to stop. And there were 2 things in it that were notable. One is he made no real promises whatsoever, and secondly, most of that speech was actually aimed at the Unionists. It was an appeal for loyalism to keep calm and support him. So immediately the civil rights leadership, which was the incipient SDLP, nationalists, some moderate Unionists, and the Communist Party, they immediately declared the truce. And we decided, that's capitulation. The time to call off an activity is when you've won something, and there are absolutely not even a promise of things in this. So we keep on, and we based it deliberately on the Selma, Alabama march. We said, we're going to do something extremely non-violent. We're going to march from Belfast to Derry, and in the expectation that we will be attacked, and O'Neill will not defend us. right? And we were
exposed in the northern
we were met in spades, you know. You know, the loyalists attacked us, the B specialists and the cops joined in, and O'Neill did then make a statement saying these nasty revolutionary bastards who are causing all this trouble.
Can you tell me a little about your involvement in the People's Democracy, and can you tell me about when you were elected as an anti-H Bloc People's Democracy Belfast City Councillor? Was that 1981?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, one of the things about being on City Council is that we believe that our role, well, first of all, we didn't take our seats because that was the general tone of the H Bloc movement. And then, you know, the council said, either you take your seats or we remove you as councillors. So we went back, held public meetings and agreed to go in. But we believed that our role as councillors was to wipe out the council, to collapse it, you know, and make life as hard as possible for it. And as a result, I was kicked out for calling Union Jack a butcher's apron. Caused wild indignation. Mind you, the loyalists had been threatening my life the week before, but that didn't upset anybody. You know? And that again opened my eyes a lot to where Sinn Féin were going, because they did support us in a sort of very tepid way, because a lot of their supporters wanted to support us, but it was quite clear that their strategy in the council was to make the council work and to reform it. Jerry Adams said something about screwing the system. You know, seem to be unaware that it ends up with the system screwing everybody. So, I think what I really want to talk about, the early People's Democracy was quite unique. It was basically a standard New Left student group and an amalgam of different, well, it was slightly different that people were into one left. You know, some of the people who were into stroke left poses ended up in the SDLP and so on. One of them went on to become an official unionist. So, but it was, and other than that, it was a standard New Left student group. A lot of radicals, a lot of excitement, a lot of cultural stuff, and you know, a lot of enthusiasm for different varieties of Marxism. The anarchists were inside, the Maoists, you know, so on and so forth. And one of the things about it was very evenly divided on religious grounds. So one of the things that people forget about the early civil rights movement is that it wasn't simply a Catholic revolt. I mean, there was a very broad feeling that unionism had run itself into the ground, was in decay, that it was stifling life for most young people, not just for Catholic youth. And so part of our early experience was the state and the loyalists were very keen on focusing in on the Protestant members of our organisation, who, you know, and really were successful in driving a lot of them away. For the rest of PD, I think the main thing I'm going to focus on, although we had lots of, is our mistakes, right? And I think there was two big major mistakes. And the first major mistake was in seeing the national question as the central and overwhelming issue of Irish politics. I mean, we still think it's a central question, but at the time, we really believed that the struggle in the north would lead to the radicalisation and mobilisation of southern workers. And again, that happened to some extent, but in the long run, southern workers had their own enemy, which was the southern bourgeoisie, and we didn't, I think, take that into account sufficiently. The other thing is we were infected with movementitis, which was a very, very common phenomenon on our section of the left. and that meant that to be part of the movement was, and to advise the movement was the main thing. And it had its successes. We had an enormous weight among Sinn Féin's Republican base. In fact, for quite a long time there wasn't any Sinn Féin. There was just Republicans who were relatively organised, and there were ourselves who were putting forward strategic and political ideas, which by and large were taken up quite a lot.
Because one time the Sinn Féin people would say the People's Democracy were the politics of the ghettos. Yeah. They wouldn't say that now.
Yeah. Right. And although I don't think we dealt well with the surrender of the reformist wing of after Bloody Sunday, I think we could have done more there. Now the movementitis thing meant that we based things around giving advice to Republicans, and not, well, it's all right to give advice to Republicans, but we should have been putting forward a Marxist programme much more firmly, recruiting to our own organisation much more firmly, and if we'd done that, we might have come out the inevitable denouement, slightly bigger and better able to take the shock of Republican collapse. One thing I would like to add about that, and that is that one of the, there's this dispute about whether the Sinn Féin betrayed the hunger strikers, did they let them go on hunger strike? One of the things I can say with absolute authority is that Sinn Féin and the Republicans had absolutely no interest in fighting the hunger strike battle or the issue of political status. And the only group that did want to fight that battle was People's Democracy. He said this is a central attack by British imperialism on the political legitimacy of the movement. But the Provost had actually done this deal on the previous ceasefire, so I said, they weren't too bright, and what they were interested in was people on the ground who they could get fighting, and the Brits offered them 50% remission, and they bought that. And they didn't want to run a campaign, and they didn't join the Relatives Action Committee until very late on, whereupon they then took it over, of course. Socialist democracy today, we had to make a break from tail-ending republicanism, and correct the political weaknesses we had, and we did that by redefining ourselves as a socialist movement and doing a much broader class analysis of Irish society, and then trying to popularise that. The debate we've been having is part of the debate in the Fourth International overall, and by and large the majority of the Fourth International have gone for broad parties as in sort of fairly general political programmes as a way of mobilising, and we're a minority position on that, but the issue is unresolved and still being fought. Is that okay?
Thanks very much. That's good.